There is a particular kind of fear that does not arrive with violence. It arrives with a knock at the door. On an ordinary Tuesday evening, when the rain has just stopped and the chimneys are smoking and you are sitting by the fire with your wife, a stranger is standing on your step. He removes his hat. He smiles politely. And then, before you have even invited him inside, he tells you the name of the school your son attended 14 years ago. He tells you the date of your sister's wedding, the colour of the dress your mother was buried in, the exact sum, to the shilling, that you withdrew from the Westminster Bank last Friday afternoon. He has never met you. He has never written to you. He could not possibly know these things, and yet he knows. This is the story of a man who appeared in 7 London households in the autumn of 1889, knowing things he had no way of knowing, asking for nothing, threatening no one, and leaving behind a string of nervous breakdowns, 2 suicides and 1 murder. And it is the story of how Sherlock Holmes, who had never been more certain of a case in his life, was wrong about almost every single piece of it. It was the 2nd week of October, and London was settling into the particular gloom that belongs only to autumn in that city. The plane trees on the squares had begun to drop their leaves. The lamplighters were starting earlier each evening. And in the sitting room at 221B Baker Street, the air was thick with pipe smoke and the smell of damp wool. I had been Holmes's companion for some years by then, and I had grown accustomed to his rhythms. He had spent the previous 3 days in what I privately called his black moods, lying on the sofa in his dressing gown, scarcely eating, staring at the ceiling as though it had personally offended him. "Watson," he said at last, without opening his eyes, "there is a man on the pavement outside who has been hesitating for 9 minutes. He has crossed the street twice. He is on his 3rd cigarette. In approximately 90 seconds, he will overcome his cowardice and ring our bell. Be so good as to put the kettle on." I had long since given up asking how he knew such things. The man who arrived, breathless and damp, gave his name as Mr. Charles Whitlock. He was perhaps 45, soft in the middle, with the slightly stooped shoulders of a clerk, and the haunted eyes of a man who has not slept properly in several days. "Mr. Holmes," he began. "I am being followed." Holmes did not look up from his pipe. "No, Mr. Whitlock, you are not. Forgive me, sir, but I assure you there has been a man. He came to my house on Tuesday. He stood in my hallway, and he spoke to me of things." Whitlock's voice failed him for a moment. Of things he could not possibly know. Holmes opened his eyes. "Go on!" Whitlock drew a long breath. He was, I noticed, the sort of man who had clearly spent the journey to Baker Street rehearsing what he meant to say, and was now finding that none of the rehearsed phrases would come. I returned home from my office on Tuesday evening at 6. My wife was in the parlour. The maid had just gone down to fetch the supper things. There was a knock at the door. My wife answered it. She told me afterwards that there was a gentleman on the step, well-dressed, perfectly polite, who asked if he might have a moment of my time on a private matter. She showed him into the hall. I came down to meet him. Holmes leaned forward, his elbows on his knees, and then he removed his hat. He said, "Good evening, Mr. Whitlock. I hope you do not mind the intrusion." And then he said, Whitlock swallowed. He said, "I trust your son Edmund is recovering well from the influenza he caught at Mr. Pendleton's preparatory school in the autumn of 1875. My son Edmund died of that influenza, Mr. Holmes. He was 11 years old. He has been in the ground for 14 years. There is no one alive outside my immediate family who knows the name of that school. My wife and I do not speak of it. We do not speak of him at all." Holmes did not move, but I had known him long enough to see the flicker behind his eyes, the interest, the slow ignition of attention. "What else did he say to you, Mr. Whitlock?" "He said other things. Small things. The name of my wife's first dog. The address of the cottage where we spent our honeymoon. The fact that I had withdrawn the sum of £142 from my bank on the previous Friday, which I had done, sir, and which not even my wife knew about. And the strangest thing of all, Mr. Holmes, he did not threaten me. He did not ask me for money. He did not ask me for anything at all. He simply spoke these things in a voice as calm and friendly as a vicar at a tea party, and then he wished me a pleasant evening and walked back out into the street. Holmes was quiet for a long moment. "And you have not slept since," he said. "No, sir, I have not. And you fear, perhaps, that he will return." "I fear worse than that, Mr. Holmes." Whitlock looked up, and there was something in his eyes I have rarely seen in a grown man. "I fear that he was never really there. I fear that I am losing my reason." Holmes rose, walked to the window, and looked down into the street. "Mr. Whitlock," he said, "you are not losing your reason. You are the 7th man in this city to come to me with that same story this month, and I have begun to suspect that the others are no longer in any condition to come at all." When Whitlock had gone, Holmes did not return to his chair. He stood for some time at the window, watching the gas lamps come up one by one along the length of Baker Street. "Watson," he said quietly, "be good enough to bring me the folder marked Anomalies. It is on the second shelf behind the volume on beekeeping." He opened it on the desk and began to spread the contents. There were 6 accounts in that folder, gathered over the previous 3 weeks, and the pattern they formed was so strange that Holmes had at first refused to believe it. A solicitor in Belgravia, visited at his own front door by a stranger who had recited to him the exact details of a romantic indiscretion from his university days. The solicitor had locked himself in his study for 2 days afterwards, and his wife had found him weeping at the desk. A retired naval officer in Bayswater visited in similar fashion, and informed of the precise location, depth, and contents of a small wooden box he had buried in his garden in 1881. The officer had collapsed of what his physician called a shock of the heart and was no longer able to speak. A schoolmistress in Hampstead told by the same stranger of an affair her late husband had carried on in 1872, of which she had only the faintest suspicion and no proof at all. "She hanged herself the following Sunday," said Holmes, without inflection. "I confess I felt a coldness pass through me." "Holmes, you did not tell me of this." "I did not tell you, Watson, because until this evening I was uncertain whether what I had on this desk was a series of coincidences or a single conspiracy. Mr. Whitlock has settled the question. 6 in 3 weeks. Whitlock makes 7. 3 are dead. 2 are in no condition to be interviewed. 1, a Mr. Harrowby of Pimlico, refuses to leave his house and will not speak to anyone but his priest. And now we have a 7th, sitting in our chair, asking us to save his sanity." "All within a half-mile radius?" I asked. "No, that is the curious thing." Holmes traced a finger across the map. Belgravia, Bayswater, Hampstead, Pimlico, Marylebone, Clerkenwell, and now Whitlock in Bloomsbury. 7 separate quarters of the city. No common neighbourhood. No common circle of acquaintance, so far as I can determine. No common profession. The naval officer never met the schoolmistress. The solicitor has no connection to the priest in Pimlico. Then, what do they have in common, Holmes? He was silent for some time. "That, Watson, is the question that has prevented me from sleeping for the past 4 nights. They have nothing in common that I can see. Different ages, different incomes, different temperaments. 2 of them never even visited London until the last decade." He stood up slowly. "And yet a stranger has appeared at each of their doors and recited to them a private fact from a private life. 7 different private lives, 7 different secrets, each one true, each one impossible for any stranger to know. Watson, I will tell you something now that I would not say to a client. In my career I have encountered perhaps 4 men whom I considered genuinely dangerous. Moriarty, of course. A blackmailer in Sussex. a poisoner in Edinburgh, one other whose name I will not mention even here. This stranger frightens me more than any of them, because the others wanted something. Money, power, revenge. I could understand them. I could anticipate them. This man wants nothing. He delivers his secrets, tips his hat, and walks away, and his victims fall to pieces behind him without his ever having raised a hand. That, Watson, is not a criminal. That is something I do not yet have a word for. I asked the question that had been growing in me since Whitlock left. Holmes. If this man knows 7 private secrets across 7 separate households, how many other households has he visited? How many have not come forward? That, Watson, is the second question that has prevented me from sleeping. We set out the next morning for Hampstead. Holmes had decided that, of the 7 cases, the school mistress was the one we must reconstruct most carefully, for the simple reason that she was dead, and therefore could not be further harmed by our intrusion. Her name had been Mrs. Eleanor Crail. She had been 53 years old, a widow of 11 years, a teacher of music to the daughters of comfortable Hampstead families. By every account she had been an unremarkable woman in the most enviable sense, well-liked, well-mannered, neither rich nor poor, with no enemies anyone could name. Her sister, a Mrs. Pembroke, met us at the door. She was a small, sharp-eyed woman in deep mourning, and she had clearly been crying. She had also clearly stopped crying for the benefit of strangers, which I think Holmes noticed and respected. My sister was not a woman given to fancies, Mr. Holmes. She was not nervous. She was not melancholy. She was not the sort who would do what she did. Not without reason. And you believe a reason was given to her. I believe a reason was given to her by the man who came to this house on the Tuesday before. He stood there. On that step I was visiting that evening. I saw him from the window. I did not hear what he said to her, but I saw her face when she came back into the room. "And what was on her face, Mrs. Pembroke?" Holmes asked gently. It was the face of a woman who had just been told something true that she had spent 20 years not knowing for certain. It was, Mr. Holmes, the face of a woman whose foundations had just been kicked out from under her. I did not understand it then. I do now. She passed Holmes a folded sheet of paper. This was on her writing desk on the Sunday morning. I found it before the constable arrived. I did not show it to the constable. I am not sure why. Perhaps I knew already that whoever had killed my sister could not be reached by a constable. The letter was very short. It said, "My dear Margaret, I know now what George did in the summer of 1872. I have known, I think, for many years. But knowing it and knowing that it is known are not the same. I cannot bear that it is known. Forgive me. I have not the strength for the other thing. Your loving sister, Eleanor." The other thing, Mrs. Pembroke. Do you know what your sister meant? I have thought about it for 10 days, Mr. Holmes. I think she meant the thing that any of us would have to face, to go on living with the knowledge that a stranger knew, that somewhere in the world, walking about, was a man who had looked at her and seen straight through to the worst secret of her marriage. She could not bear that a stranger possessed her shame. Holmes did not speak for several minutes. He rose, walked to the window, and looked out at the grey London sky. "Mrs. Pembroke," he said at last, "may I ask you a question that will seem strange? Of course, Mr. Holmes, in the last 6 months, has your sister had any new acquaintances? Any visitors of an unusual sort? Has she opened any new correspondence, joined any new society, sat for a new portrait, given any new servant a recommendation?" Mrs. Pembroke thought for a long moment. There was a young man who came in the spring, a photographer. He was making a series of portraits of musicians for some periodical or other. He took her likeness, sitting at the piano. He stayed for tea. He was very charming. She enjoyed his company. I do not think she heard from him again. Holmes turned from the window very slowly. A photographer. Did you happen to keep his card? I do not believe she ever had one. He was introduced by a friend of a friend in the way these things happen. The name was Bramwell, or Brandwell. I cannot say with certainty. He was perhaps 30, dark hair, a pleasant manner. Mrs. Pembroke, said Holmes. I would be very grateful if you would think carefully and tell me everything you can remember about that young man. We left the house in Hampstead an hour later with 3 pages of Watson's notebook filled in close handwriting and a slow, cold suspicion taking shape between us. Holmes, are you suggesting? I am suggesting nothing yet, Watson. I am suggesting that we visit Mr. Whitlock at his home this evening and ask him a particular question. I am suggesting that we make a list of every social call, every visiting tradesman, every commissioned artist, every charitable interview each of our 7 households has experienced in the past 12 months. And then, Watson, I think we shall find that our stranger is not as much of a stranger as he has wished his victims to believe. For the next 3 days, Holmes did almost nothing else. He visited each of the 7 households in turn, where he was admitted, and made polite inquiries with the relatives or housekeepers of those who were not. He spoke to butlers, parlour-maids, gardeners, cooks. He asked one question only, in 100 different ways. Who has come into this house in the past year who did not belong here? By the 3rd evening he had a column of names that was 40 entries long. By the 4th morning, with patient cross-referencing, he had reduced it to 11. By the 4th evening, to 4. He laid the final list before me with the satisfaction of a chess player who has, after a long campaign, set his pieces. 4 individuals, Watson, have entered at least 2 of our 7 households in the past 12 months. Only 4, in a city of 4 millions. And one of them I should very much like to think has entered all 7. A churchwarden conducting a charitable subscription drive, a piano tuner working for a Bond Street firm, a young man writing a book on London families for a publishing house, a photographer named in 3 of the houses, never the same name twice. The photographer. In Hampstead he was Bramwell, in Belgravia he was Mr. Wessex, in Bayswater he was a Mr. Harcourt. Each time he made a small, charming, perfectly forgettable visit. He took a photograph, he shared a pot of tea, he listened, he left, and the family thought nothing more of him, until some months later, a different stranger came to the door and recited their secrets acts back to them. Then they are working together, the photographer and the stranger. They may be the same man, Watson, we do not yet know, but here is what we do know. We know that someone has, for at least a year, been entering the homes of respectable Londoners under a pretext that opens drawing rooms. We know that he has been spending an hour, 2 hours, sometimes a whole afternoon, in conversation with the lady or gentleman of the house. We know that during such a conversation, a great deal may be observed. Letters left on a writing desk, photographs in the hall, a child's drawing pinned to the nursery wall, a particular volume on the bookshelf, often handled, the way a husband does not quite meet his wife's eye when a certain subject is raised. A very observant man, Watson, may walk into a house knowing nothing of its inhabitants, and walk out 2 hours, later in possession of the architecture of their lives, their joys, their sorrows, their evasions. He need not see the secret itself. He need only see the shape of the absence. Holmes, that is what you do. He looked at me strangely. That is what I do, Watson. It has not previously occurred to me that another might be doing it. Or rather, it has not occurred to me that another might be doing it for purposes other than my own. And what are his purposes, do you think? Holmes shook his head. That is what I cannot yet see. He extorts nothing. He demands nothing. He has not been observed to communicate with any of his victims after the visit. He arrives, he speaks, he goes, he does not return. He destroys these people, Watson. Quietly, surgically, and then he vanishes. There is no profit in it that I can see. There is no malice toward any individual that I can detect. And yet 7 households in this city are in ruins because of him, 3 souls in their graves or close to them. He rose. There is one more visit we must make tonight, Watson. The photographic firm on Bond Street. Get your hat. The Bond Street photographic firm was the kind of establishment that catered to a particular class of customer. The window held portraits of cabinet ministers and concert pianists. The brass on the door was polished daily. A small bell rang as we entered. Mr. Enright the younger was a portly gentleman of 60, with side whiskers of a most determined character and a quiet, courteous manner. He had been expecting us, having received Holmes's card by messenger that afternoon. Mr. Holmes, I have made all the inquiries you requested. I have the records here, but I confess I am troubled by what I find. You may say what troubles you, Mr. Enright. The old photographer adjusted his spectacles. You asked me about a series of commissions undertaken over the past year by an itinerant photographer engaged on our behalf. A series of portraits of musicians, naval gentlemen, and others taken in their own homes for various periodicals. Yes, Mr. Holmes, we have undertaken no such series. None whatsoever. We have not engaged any photographer for such work in 3 years. The young man you describe is not in our employment, and has never been. Whatever cards he was carrying, whatever credentials he was offering, they did not come from this firm. This card, Mr. Enright, is one of yours. It was given by the visitor at 4 of the 7 houses. The old man took the card. He studied it through his spectacles. He held it up to the lamp. This is one of our cards, Mr. Holmes. It is genuine, but the name engraved upon it is not. It is not the name of anyone employed by this firm, nor anyone who has been so employed in the years since I have kept the records. It is the name of my son. Your son, Mr. Enright? My son Thomas, who died of typhoid in the year 1881. He was 23. Holmes was silent for a long moment. Mr. Enright. Has anyone, in the past year, entered this shop and made inquiries about your son, about his work, about the records of his commissions? The old man frowned. He thought for a long while. There was a young man last spring, a pleasant young man. He said he was writing a history of London photography. He asked to see our older records. I did not. I did not think anything of it. He was here for perhaps 2 hours. He took notes. He was very respectful when I mentioned Thomas. He used my son's name. Mr. Enright, I am afraid he did. I am afraid he is using your son's name to enter houses across this city, and I am afraid that he has been doing so for at least a year. The old man set down the card. He removed his spectacles. He passed one large, careful hand across his face. Mr. Holmes, what sort of man does such a thing? That, Mr. Enright, is precisely what I am attempting to determine. We walked back along Bond Street in silence for some time. The evening had grown raw, and a thin rain was beginning. Carriages clattered past. Somewhere a street singer was attempting Schubert with an indifferent voice. Holmes. He has done worse than commit fraud. He has stolen a dead man's name to do it. He has done worse than that, Watson. He has stolen a dead man's name in order to enter the homes of strangers, and in those homes he has gathered information that he could not possibly have gathered without that name. He has not merely impersonated, he has used the dead to harvest the living. And he has chosen, of all the dead photographers in London, the son of an old man who keeps faithful records. Which means, Watson, that he wanted to be found, or at the least, he did not mind being found. Which means that whatever his purpose is, Watson, the discovery of his existence is part of it. By the following week, we had collected from 6 of the 7 households a description of the photographer. The descriptions did not agree. In Hampstead, he had been 30, with brown hair worn rather long and a slight stammer on his consonants. In Belgravia he had been 35, with black hair cropped short and a clipped military manner. In Pimlico, 25 and red-bearded. In Marylebone, dark-haired and clean-shaven, and so unremarkable that the parlour-maid could not properly describe him at all. He has been 7 men, Watson, or he has been one man who is very gifted with theatrical paint and wigs and the art of carrying himself. Then we cannot find him by his face. We cannot find him by his face. But every man has things he cannot disguise. The set of his bones, the length of his stride, the pitch of his laugh, the way he holds a teacup. And these have been observed. These have been observed, Watson, but not yet collated. Tomorrow morning we will begin to collate them. But the morning brought something Holmes had not anticipated. The telegram was from a Detective Inspector Lestrade of Scotland Yard. It read, "Body discovered Highgate Cemetery this morning. Gentleman, 40 years of age, hanged from oak near East Gate. Found on his person calling card engraved Thomas Enright, photographer, Bond Street. Card known to you from yesterday's inquiry. Suggest immediate attendance. Holmes. Get your coat, Watson. We are going to Highgate. The cemetery in October has a quality that no other place in London possesses. The fog catches in the cypress branches. The angels on the tombs go silver-grey with damp. Even the crows seem to move more quietly." Lestrade greeted us with the slightly defeated expression he reserved for cases in which he had begun to suspect Holmes might be needed. "Mr. Holmes, I am sorry to bring you out in this weather. I am sorrier to bring you here at all. His name? That is the first difficulty, Mr. Holmes. We do not know his name. He carried no documents save the one card I described in my telegram. He wore good clothes, but the maker's marks have been cut from the linings. He carried no watch, no purse, no rings. His pockets contained 1 shilling and 6pence in coin, a fresh handkerchief, and a small piece of paper with a single word on it. Nothing else." Holmes took the paper. He read it. He looked up at the body. "How long has he been dead?" "Since perhaps 3 in the morning. The keeper found him at 7. There are no signs of struggle. He climbed the tree himself by all appearances. He fastened the rope himself. He stepped from the branch himself. He was a strong, healthy man in early middle age. And yet, Mr. Holmes, a man does not climb a tree in Highgate Cemetery in October and hang himself for no reason at all. He spent perhaps a quarter of an hour at the foot of the tree. He examined the man's boots, his trouser cuffs, his fingernails. He examined the bark where the rope had bitten. He examined the small, neat coil of unused rope that had been set carefully at the base of the trunk. He spoke at last to Lestrade. "You will find, Inspector, that this man is not a man any of his neighbours will be able to identify." "How do you mean, Mr. Holmes?" "I mean that he has lived under a false identity for some considerable time. The maker's marks have not been cut from his clothes in the last hour. They were cut some weeks ago by a careful hand. He has been preparing for this morning for at least a fortnight. The handkerchief is fresh, but the boots are old and very worn, far older than the suit. He has worn this suit perhaps a dozen times in his life. He has worn these boots every day for 3 or 4 years. He was a man who dressed beneath his station, Inspector. He was at pains not to be noticed. He had something to conceal. And the card on his person, Mr. Holmes? The card on his person, Inspector, identifies him only as a man who held that card. It does not identify him as Thomas Enright. Thomas Enright has been dead for 8 years. You knew the card. I knew the card. Indeed, I have come from a case in which this card has appeared 7 times. And do you believe, Mr. Holmes, that this man is the one who has been using it?" Holmes did not answer at once. He turned and looked at the body once more, and his face was set in the strange, drawn expression I had seen on it only for a few times in our long acquaintance. I believe, Inspector, that someone has gone to a great deal of trouble to make us believe that he is the one. Which is rather a different question. Watson, we will have a great deal to discuss in the cab back to Baker Street. For some time Holmes did not speak. He sat with his eyes half closed, his fingers steepled and his face entirely without expression. Holmes, you do not believe that man is our visitor. I do not, despite the card. Because of the card, Watson. Because of the card, and because of certain other features that I will describe to you in a moment. Tell me first, what did you observe? A man in middle age, strongly built, well-dressed but not extravagantly, his face composed. He had hanged himself in a public place, in a place of mourning, in a place where he would certainly be found. Yes. Anything more? His boots were poor, his suit was fine, there was a discrepancy. There was. Anything else? I confess, Holmes, no. His right hand, Watson. The pad of his index finger. I did not look closely. It was coal-used. Not the callus of a pen, which is on the second finger and the side of the third. Not the callus of a tradesman's tool, which would be different in shape. The callus of a particular small instrument, pressed with the index finger many thousands of times. The callus, Watson, of a photographer. Then he was a photographer. Then it was him. It was a photographer. That is not the same as being our photographer. Watson, consider what we have. A man who has, by all evidence, lived under an assumed identity. A man who has gone to elaborate trouble to remove all means of identifying himself. A man who has hanged himself in a public cemetery, leaving on his person a calling card he knew would be linked to the visits to our 7 households. A man who, in his pocket, carried a piece of paper bearing the single word Enoff. You think it is a confession. It is presented as a confession. It is intended by someone to be received as a confession. We are intended to look at this man, see the card, see the despair, and conclude that our case is closed. That the visitor has destroyed himself out of guilt or fear, that there are no further victims to come, that we may all retire to our parlours and forget the matter. And you do not believe it. I do not believe it because no man who has spent a year of his life ruining other men's lives for no apparent profit, no man who has carefully assembled a method as patient and as elegant as this one, no such man simply hangs himself in a tree because his work is done. There is no profit motive that ends. There is no malice that exhausts itself. Then who is he? Watson. I think he was an accomplice, or perhaps a partner. I think he was useful. I think he had begun to be inconvenient. I think the man we seek looked at him, decided that the time had come to draw a line across our investigation, and arranged the matter accordingly. Holmes, you are saying that man was murdered. I am saying that man was hanged. Whether by his own hand under instruction or under more direct compulsion, I cannot yet determine. The telegram was from Mr. Whitlock. The stranger has returned. He left a letter. I am not opening it. Come at once. Whitlock was in a state of considerable agitation, but to his credit, he had done what Holmes had asked him to do, which was to touch the letter as little as possible and to call for us at once. He pushed it through the letter slot at 5 o'clock this afternoon, Mr. Holmes. The maid heard the slot. By the time she reached the door, he was gone. Did she see him? She saw a man walking away, the back of a grey overcoat, a grey hat. She did not see his face. Holmes lifted the letter carefully. He examined the seal. He examined the paper. He held it to the light. The paper is of a kind sold by perhaps 40 stationers in London. The ink is common. The hand is disguised. He has written with his left hand. Although he is right-handed, he has not licked the seal, which is a small detail of caution. Will you open it, Mr. Holmes? I will open it. But first, I would like you to consider something, Mr. Whitlock. The man who wrote this letter wants you to read it. He has chosen the moment of its delivery with care. He has timed it for the hour at which he believed you would be most fragile. I do not understand. He pushed it through the slot at 5 o'clock, the hour at which your daughter, by your wife's account this morning, walks home from her music lesson. The hour at which you are most apt to be at the door watching for her. He timed it, Mr. Whitlock, so that you would be in the hall when it arrived, so that you would touch it first. How? He could know because he has been watching your house. For how long, I cannot yet say, but long enough to know the hour at which your daughter returns. He is watching my daughter. He is watching all of you, Mr. Whitlock. He has been doing so for a long while. I do not believe he intends harm to the child. I believe he intends to demonstrate, by such small acts of timing, that he is everywhere and that nothing in your life escapes his attention. He drew out a single sheet of cream paper. The letter said, Mr. Whitlock, please convey to your visitor, the gentleman from Baker Street, that he is following the wrong scent. The man in Highgate Cemetery was not your stranger. The man in Highgate Cemetery was a man who knew too little to be useful and a little too much to be left alive. He has been removed. If Mr. Holmes wishes to continue his inquiries, he will find that there are no further trails to follow. The 7 households have been visited. The work is complete. There will be no further calls. You may resume your life in such peace as you are capable of finding. I bear you, sir, no personal malice. I bear none of you any malice. I have done only what was necessary, and I have done it, I assure you, with reluctance. I will not sign my name. You would not know it if I did. A friend. For a long moment no one spoke. Whitlock said in a voice that shook only slightly, He says it is over. He says it is over, Mr. Whitlock. He hopes that we will believe him. He hopes that I will close my file and return to my pipe and my violin. He hopes that you will lock your door and learn to sleep again. He hopes very particularly that we will not ask the question that this letter most begs to be asked. And what question is that, Mr. Holmes? The question, Mr. Whitlock, is why 7? Why these 7? Why precisely 7? For 3 days after the letter, Holmes did not leave the house. He did not eat properly. He slept perhaps 4 hours of the 72. He smoked through almost a full pound of his black shag tobacco. Mrs. Hudson brought up trays which he sent down again untouched. He spoke very little. He stared at the photographs. He moved them from one position to another. He laid them in different orders. He sorted them by age, by neighborhood, by profession, by income, by marital status, by religious denomination. On the 4th morning, just after dawn, I came down to find him asleep at last, in his chair, the 7 photographs still in front of him on the floor. But the photographs were not in random order anymore. They were in a line, and above the line he had placed a small calendar of the year 1875. When he woke half an hour later, he did not waste a word on greeting. Watson, I have been an idiot. Holmes, I have been searching for what these 7 have in common in the present. I should have been searching for what they had in common in the past. Look, Whitlock's son Edmund died of influenza at Mr. Pendleton's preparatory school in the autumn of 1875. Mrs. Crail's husband, in her own letter, did something in the summer of 1872 which she could not bear to have known. The naval officer in Bayswater buried a small box in his garden in 1881. The solicitor's romantic indiscretion was in his student days, which were 1872 to 1875. The priest in Pimlico, whom I visited yesterday and who would say very little, became visibly distressed at the mention of the year 1875. Do you see, Watson? They share a year. Some of them share a year, and the others share an event, and the year is not always the same year, but the kind of event is. Each of them did something, or had something happen to them, between the years 1872 and 1881. Each of them carries from that period a private wound, a private shame, a private grief, a private secret. And our visitor knows all 7 secrets. And our visitor knows all 7 secrets. Which means, Watson, that our visitor has access to information from that period. That he has either been present for the events, or has acquired the documents, or has spoken to those who knew. Whitlock's son died at a particular preparatory school. Pendleton's. I have ascertained that this school closed in 1879 for reasons no one will speak of plainly. The headmaster, Pendleton himself, retired into private life and died in 1884. His widow lives still in St. John's Wood. She is, by all accounts, a very private woman who has spent the past 5 years politely refusing all visitors. You think the school is the centre. I think the school is a centre. I do not yet know if it is the centre. But Pendleton's school is the one document that links to Whitlock with certainty. And Mrs. Pendleton is, by my count, the last person living who would know who attended that school in 1875, who taught there, who served there, who was sent away from there, and who never came back. And we are going to see her. We are going to see her this afternoon, Watson, and I do not think she will wish to receive us. But I think we may persuade her. Mrs. Pendleton was a woman of perhaps 70. She was small and very thin, with grey hair drawn back in a knot, and she had the carriage of a woman who had decided, many years ago, that she would not be moved by anything the world chose to send her. She received us in her parlour, because Holmes had sent a note ahead, in which, he afterwards confessed, he had been a little less than entirely truthful about the purpose of the call. Mr. Holmes, I understood from your note that you wished to consult me about a matter of charitable subscription. I apologize, Mrs. Pendleton. I came because I did not believe you would have received me had I told you the truth. And what is the truth, Mr. Holmes? The truth, madam, is that I am investigating a series of crimes which have, in the last 6 weeks, claimed 3 lives. The crimes are connected to a young pupil who died at your late husband's preparatory school in the autumn of 1875. His name was Edmund Whitlock. The father of that boy is my client. I have come to ask you what you remember of that year. For a long time, Mrs. Pendleton did not move. Then she rose, walked to the bell-pull, and rang for the maid. The maid appeared. "Tea, please, Annie, for 3, and then I do not wish to be disturbed until I tell you otherwise." The maid withdrew. "Mr. Holmes, I am going to tell you something that I have not spoken of to any living soul. I am going to tell you because I believe you, because I have read of you. Because the boy you describe, Edmund Whitlock, is one of 7 boys who died at my husband's school in the years between 1873 and 1879. 7. Of what causes? Of various causes. Influenza, pneumonia, one of a fall from a window, one of what the doctor was kind enough to call a fever of unknown origin, one of what the doctor was honest enough to call drowning. Drowning, Mrs. Pendleton. In the school pond, Mr. Holmes. He was 9 years old. He had been a difficult child. He had been disciplined that afternoon by my husband. He was found in the pond the following morning. Mrs. Pendleton, forgive me. Are you saying that your husband's school was? I am saying, Mr. Holmes, that my husband's school was not a good place, that my husband was not a good man, that I knew it for many years and did nothing, and that I have lived with that knowledge every day of the 11 years since he died. I am saying that the school closed because parents began to talk to one another, that no charges were ever brought because the parents of dead boys do not, on the whole, wish their dead sons' names to be associated with such inquiries, that the matter was hushed because everyone involved wished it to be hushed, that 7 boys are buried in 7 different cemeteries across this country, and 7 sets of parents have spent the years since 1879 telling one another that their sons died of fevers and falls. Holmes spoke very quietly. Mrs. Pendleton, of the 7 boys, How many fathers do you know to be living still? She looked up. All 7, Mr. Holmes, to my knowledge. Will you look at these, Mrs. Pendleton, and tell me if you recognize any of these faces? Mr. Holmes, these are not 7 men. These are the fathers of 7 boys. Mr. Whitlock, Edmund. Mr. Crail, husband to the woman in the next one, their boy Henry. Mr. Harrowby, his son was John. The naval officer is Captain Marsh. His son was William. The solicitor is Mr. Travers. His son was the one who drowned. The schoolmaster I do not know personally, but I recognize him from the funeral. His son was Thomas. The clergyman, Mr. Boyle of Pimlico. His boy was Arthur, and Mrs. Crail, the schoolmistress. Her son? Her son. Yes, her son was Daniel. He was 8. He died, the school records say, of an undiagnosed fever. He died, I tell you now, because my husband wept him for an hour in the courtyard one cold December afternoon, and the child took pneumonia the same night, and we could not, my husband and I, find a doctor in time who would not ask questions. Mrs. Crail hanged herself, said Holmes very softly. I know. I read it in the paper. I have prayed for her every night for 10 days. Pendleton. The man who has visited these 7 households, who has told each of these parents the precise secret of how their child died, who has done so without any apparent purpose, without any apparent profit, without any apparent malice, without taking anything but their peace. Do you have a notion who he might be? She was silent for a long time. Then she said, Mr. Holmes, I have a notion, but I would beg you to hear me out before you act on it, because if I am right, the man you are hunting is not what you think he is. He is not a criminal in the way that you understand criminals. He has, I think, a reason, and the reason is a kind I am not certain you will be able to dismiss. There was an 8th boy, Mr. Holmes. There was an 8th boy who did not die. The 8th boy, Mrs. Pendleton. His name was Samuel. He was brought to the school in 1874. He was the son of a widow, a Mrs. Aldermean, who had been left in straitened circumstances and who could afford the school only because my husband took him at a reduced rate. The reason my husband took him at a reduced rate, Mr. Holmes, is that Samuel Aldermean was a child of unusual intelligence and unusual quietness, and my husband had decided he would make a useful object lesson. He was punished often. He was punished severely. He was punished by my husband in ways that I will not describe in this room. He was punished, in particular, because he was the kind of boy who watched everything and forgot nothing. My husband disliked that quality in a child. And the boy survived. The boy survived. He was at the school for almost 5 years. He saw, I believe, every one of the 7 deaths. He knew details that none of the parents were ever told. He knew which fevers were not fevers. He knew which falls were not falls. He saw the schoolmaster put a small boy in a cold cellar overnight in February. He saw the schoolmaster strike a 9-year-old across the face with a riding crop for a single mispronounced word. He saw, Mr. Holmes, everything that I did not have the courage to see. When the school closed in 1879, Samuel was 13. He went back to his mother. His mother died of consumption within a 12-month. He went into the world alone, with nothing in his pocket but a great quantity of information about the deaths of 7 boys, and the names and addresses of their families, which my husband kept in a leather-bound ledger that Samuel certainly read. And he is the man we are looking for. I do not know with certainty that he is the man you are looking for, Mr. Holmes. I have not seen him since he was 13 years of age. I would not know him if he walked into this room today. But I have thought of him often in these 11 years. I have wondered what becomes of a boy who had witnessed such things and survived them. I have wondered whether he would carry it with him, whether it would grow in him, what sort of man it would make him. Mrs. Pendleton, why now? Why this particular autumn? Because, Mr. Holmes, my husband's school closed in October of 1879, 10 years ago this month, and because Samuel Aldermean would now be 28 years old, the age at which a man, I think, decides what kind of justice he is willing to settle for in the world. My husband, despite everything I have said of him, was a man who kept records. He kept the school's records to the day it closed, and he kept them carefully. After his death I burned most of them, but I kept these. I have kept them for 11 years because I could not decide whether to destroy them or to deliver them to someone who might one day make use of them. What are they, Mrs. Pendleton? They are the 7 death notices, the originals, with my husband's notes in the margins of what really happened. I think, Mr. Holmes, that they should now be in your possession. I think that I have waited long enough. We stood to go. Mrs. Pendleton stood with us. At the door of the parlour she paused. Mr. Holmes. Yes, madam. If Samuel Aldermean is the man you are hunting, and if you find him, I will ask you something. Anything, madam. I will ask you not to destroy him, whatever the law requires. I will ask you to remember that the world destroyed him first, when he was 8 years old, in my husband's house, while I stood in the corridor and listened and did nothing. I will ask you to remember that whatever he has done as a boy who once watched 7 other boys be killed for sport. And I will ask you, Mr. Holmes, to consider whether the 7 men he has visited deserve to live the years they have lived in peace. I do not, Mrs. Pendleton. I do not have an answer to that. Neither do I, Mr. Holmes. Neither, I think, does he. For a long time after we returned to Baker Street, Holmes did not speak. He sat with the letters in his lap and his eyes on the fire, and for the first time in our acquaintance I saw on his face the expression of a man who was not entirely certain what he was hunting. Holmes, what will you do? I do not yet know, Watson. If you find him, if I find him, I will do my duty. I will see him handed to Lestrade. I will see him tried by the law of the land for what the law of the land considers his crimes. And his crimes are, Watson, that is the question. The 7 men he has visited have committed no crime that the law recognizes. They sent their boys to a school in good faith. Their boys died of what they were told were natural causes. They have grieved as fathers grieve. They have lived as honest men live. They have lived believing a lie. They have lived believing a lie that was told to them, not a lie that they told. There is a moral difference. And yet 7 of their lives now stand in ruin. 1 of them lies in her own grave, 1 in a hospital bed, 3 more never to recover. All because a man walked into their parlours and recited to them a truth they had been carrying without knowing they carried it. He told them nothing they did not on some level already know. He killed Mrs. Crail, Holmes. He spoke a sentence in her hallway. She killed herself. Are those the same thing, Watson? I am asking you in earnest. They are not the same in the eyes of the law. Are they the same in any other eyes that matter? Holmes? The man in Highgate? Yes, there is the man in Highgate. There is the fact that Samuel Aldermean, if it is he, has taken a man's life directly. There is no ambiguity in that. Whether the man was an accomplice, or a witness, or simply a danger to him, he hanged that man in a cemetery and arranged the matter to mislead us. That is murder, Watson. That is the line. Then you have your answer. I have an answer. I do not yet have peace with it. Tomorrow, Watson, we will begin to look for him. I have not the least doubt that we can find him. He has left, in this Bond Street card, in the timing of his letter through Whitlock's door, in the man in Highgate, more clues than a careful criminal would ever leave. He has been telling us where to look, Watson, since the beginning. I have only just understood it. He wants to be found. He wants to be found. He has done what he came to do. He has finished his 7 visits. He has told 7 men what they did, and he has watched, I think, what it has done to them. the man in Highgate, who was almost certainly an associate of some kind from his younger days, has been removed because he had become a risk. And now Samuel Aldermean is waiting, Watson, for me to come and find him, so that he may tell me, in his own words, what he has done and why, and so that the matter finally may be at an end. And then, Watson, we shall see. The death notices, when Holmes finally opened them, contained one piece of information that he had not known to look for. In the margin of each one, in the late headmaster's careful handwriting, was a small notation in pencil, A.S. beside each name. A.S. Aldermean saw. Watson, he saw each one. Pendleton recorded that he saw each one. Pendleton noted it, year by year, child by child, in case it ever became important. You think the headmaster was afraid of him? I think the headmaster, at some level, he probably did not admit even to himself, knew that he had taught a boy to be a witness, and that the boy was a danger to him. I think it occurred to him, as the school began to fall apart in 1879, that Samuel Aldermean was the one set of eyes from which there would be no concealment. There is one further address in Mrs. Pendleton's bundle, Watson. A widow's address in Camden, the home of Samuel Aldermean's mother. The address as it was in 1879. The woman herself has been dead for 10 years, but the address may yet lead us somewhere. The address proved to be a respectable but modest terraced house, now occupied by a Mrs. Beetham, who had taken the tenancy 9 years previously and remembered Mrs. Aldermean very faintly as the previous tenant. There was a boy, sir. Yes, a young man by then, I suppose. He came after his mother passed. He took her things in a single small trunk. I have not seen him since. Did he leave a forwarding address, Mrs. Beetham? No, sir. He took the trunk and he walked away. I remember it because he was very quiet. He was very polite. He did not weep at the funeral, sir, which I thought strange in a son. He thanked me for my trouble. He paid the last week's rent that his mother had owed, and he walked away up the street with the trunk on his shoulder. Mrs. Beetham, has anyone come asking after him in the years since? No, sir, not until you. And his mother, before she died, did she speak of him? Did she say what trade he meant to take up? Did she speak of any school, any apprenticeship, any acquaintance to whom he might have gone? She spoke very little, sir. She was very tired. But I will say this. She had a brother, a bachelor uncle to the boy. He lived in Camden Town then, near the locks. He was a photographer, sir. He took portraits of children for shillings apiece on a Sunday afternoon by the canal. I remember it because Mrs. Aldermean was very proud of him. She said he had taught Samuel his trade in the years after the school. His name, Mrs. Beetham? Mr. Aldermean, sir. Mr. Joseph Aldermean. He died, perhaps 6 years ago. The boy inherited his cameras. That is the last I heard of either of them. Holmes, a photographer's nephew. Who learned the trade? Who would carry it as his own? Yes, Watson, and the man in Highgate, with the camera shutter callous on his finger. Yes, Watson, you knew. I suspected. I did not wish to be right. Then who was he, Holmes? The man in Highgate. Joseph Aldermean, Watson, the bachelor uncle, who has not been dead for 6 years at all, who has been very much alive and assisting his nephew in this small project of theirs, until, I think, the nephew came to feel that even an uncle who had taught him his trade was an inconvenience when the time came to draw a line under the matter. Watson, we are not going home tonight. It was past 9 in the evening when we climbed the stairs to the rooms in Clerkenwell. Holmes had not told me how he knew where to go. I think he had been working it out for some hours by then, perhaps from the moment in the Camden Street when the figure in the fog raised his hat. By the time we reached the door at the top of the stairs, he was carrying himself with the particular calm I had seen in him before only on the rare occasions when he believed he was about to meet a man who was in some private way his equal. He knocked once. A voice from inside said very quietly, "Please come in, Mr. Holmes." I have been hoping you would come this evening." He was perhaps 28 years old, dark hair, neatly combed, a clean-shaven, almost ordinary face, grey eyes, a grey suit. The kind of man you would pass in any London street and not remember a moment later. "Mr. Aldermean, Mr. Holmes." "My friend Dr. Watson." "Dr. Watson, forgive me. There is only the one chair. Doctor, would you take the chair? I shall bring another from the bedroom." He moved with a quietness that was almost unnerving. He did not appear afraid. He did not appear defiant. He appeared, more than anything, tired. "Mr. Aldermean, I have come to ask you some questions. I will answer them, Mr. Holmes. I've been preparing to answer them for some time. Why did you visit the 7 households?" He was silent for a long moment. He looked at the fire. "Mr. Holmes, I will give you my honest answer, because I think no other answer will satisfy you. I went to those households because for 10 years I lay awake at night, thinking of 7 boys whose names I knew, and whose graves I had visited, and whose fathers and mothers had been told, every one of them, that their boys had died of something other than what they had died of." He looked up. His grey eyes met Holmes's. "I went to those households because I believed those parents had a right to know what had been done to their children. I believed that no one else was going to tell them. I believed that I was perhaps the last person living who could. You knew what it would do to them. I knew what knowing would do to me, Mr. Holmes. I had carried it for 10 years. I could not carry it any longer alone. I do not say that I was right. I say only that I had reached the limit of what one man can hold." "Mrs. Crail is dead, Mr. Aldermean." "I know." Mr. Travers cannot speak. "I know." "Captain Marsh is in no condition to receive visitors." "I know, Mr. Holmes. I know each of them. I have followed each of them in the weeks since I called. I have stood across the street from each of their houses. I have seen the lights go out and not come on again. I have seen the curtains stay drawn. I have not been spared, Mr. Holmes, the knowledge of what I did. I tell you that on my mother's grave, which I visited yesterday, and your uncle, Mr. Aldermean, in Highgate. My uncle was not a well man, Mr. Holmes. He had begun, in the last months, to feel the weight of what we had done. He had begun to drink. He had begun to speak of going to the police. I told him I would not stop him. I told him he should do as his conscience required. And then he asked me to help him die, Mr. Holmes, because he had not the courage to do it himself, because he believed it was the only honourable thing left for him to do. He had loved me, you understand. He had taken me in when I had no one. He had taught me what I knew. And at the end, he asked me one last favour, to help him into the tree, to tie the knot, to leave the card, to make of his death a punctuation to the matter, since neither of us could think of another. You will not believe me, Mr. Holmes. I would not believe me in your place, but I helped him die because he asked me to, and I left the card so that you would have something to find. And I sent the letter to Mr. Whitlock so that you would know that I knew you were coming. And I have sat here this past week waiting for the knock at the door. And the boy in the school pond, Mr. Aldermean. Daniel Crail, you said you saw that one. I saw him pushed, Mr. Holmes. I saw the master push him. I was 8 years old. I was in the dormitory window. I saw it. I did not call out. I was afraid. I was 8 years old, and I was afraid. I have not spoken of it to a living soul, Mr. Holmes, until this evening. I told the 7 parents the truths of their children's deaths. I did not tell them the truth of mine. I did not tell them that I watched and said nothing. I think, Mr. Holmes, that is why I came to their houses. Not because I believed they deserved to know. They did. But that is not why. I came because I needed someone in the world to know that I had been the boy in the window, that I had watched, that I had not cried out, that I had carried it for 20 years and that I could not any longer carry it alone. And so you put the burden on them. And so I put the burden on them, Mr. Holmes. Yes, I see it now. I did not see it then. I told myself I was doing it for them. I was doing it, I think, for me. Mr. Aldermean, you left this where I would find it. Yes, Mr. Holmes. You wrote on the back the number 7, 7 times. Yes, Mr. Holmes. Not because there were 7 households. No, Mr. Holmes, but because there were 7 boys. 7 boys, Mr. Holmes. I did not visit 7 parents because there were 7 parents. I visited 7 parents because there were 7 boys. The number was never an accident. The number was the only thing the boys had left. And the callus on your uncle's finger, Mr. Aldermean. He had been a photographer for 30 years, Mr. Holmes. He pressed the bulb 100 times a day. He had the callus before I was born. I knew you would find it. I knew you would understand that you were looking at a photographer. I knew you would understand that one photographer was not the photographer. I trusted that you would not stop with him. You wished to be found, Mr. Aldermean. I wished to be found by you, Mr. Holmes. I did not wish to be found by Inspector Lestrade. I did not wish my mother's name to appear in the public prints, or my uncle's, or my own. I wished to be found by a man who would listen to me before he turned the key in the lock. And now I have listened, Mr. Aldermean. And now you have listened, Mr. Holmes. I will not write here what was said in the rooms above the print shop in the half hour that followed. I will not write what Holmes asked Mr. Aldermean to do, nor what Mr. Aldermean agreed to do, nor under what condition Holmes finally rose from his chair and put on his hat, and walked back down the dark stairs into the Clerkenwell fog. I will say only that I have known Sherlock Holmes for many years now, and that in all those years I have seen him make perhaps 2 decisions that the strict reading of the law would not have permitted him to make. This was one of them. I will say also that Detective Inspector Lestrade was informed 2 days afterwards that the man in Highgate Cemetery had been identified as a Mr. Joseph Aldermean of Camden, a photographer of solitary habits, who had been suffering for some years from melancholia and who had taken his own life in the manner of his choosing. The case was duly closed. The 7 households were duly informed that the gentleman who had visited them had died by his own hand and would trouble them no further. Mr. Whitlock recovered in time. Mr. Harrowby left the church and went to live with his sister in Yorkshire. The widow of Captain Marsh found a small piece of a sort. The solicitor returned to his practice in Belgravia. The schoolmaster in Marylebone lived on for several more years. The clergyman in Pimlico died in the spring of the following year of natural causes and was much mourned by his parish. Mrs. Pendleton in St. John's Wood received in November a small package containing a bundle of 7 death notices tied with black ribbon and a short unsigned note which she burned without reading. She lived another 4 years. She died, I am told, peacefully. And as for Mr. Samuel Aldermean, I am told he took ship from the East India docks the following Wednesday, bound for a port whose name I will not record here, with a single trunk on his shoulder and a small camera in a leather case. I am told he has not been heard of since. I am told that somewhere in the world there is a quiet, dark-haired young man who takes photographs of strangers for shillings apiece, and who has perhaps by now learned to sleep through the night. I do not know if Holmes was right to let him go. I do not know if any man could have known. I know only that on certain autumn evenings, when the fog comes down on Baker Street and the lamps come up along the length of the road, I have seen my friend stand at the window with his pipe between his teeth, looking out at the long row of lit windows that runs the length of the street, and I have wondered which of those windows holds a man who is sitting by his fire, beside his wife, on an ordinary evening with a secret he has carried for many years. And I have wondered, on those evenings, how many strangers are walking up to how many doors in how many cities, with the names of how many children written in pencil on the back of how many cards. If this story stayed with you, the channel is full of others like it. The next mystery is waiting on screen. Good night.